Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our second Collaborate, Educate, and Participate, Building Collaborative Educational Partnerships with Families to Support Student Growth. As I am Paige Woodhouse, the Director of Special Education for Caston, Eastern Pulaski, and Pioneer School Districts. And today I have a guest with us, Joanne from Vocational Rehabilitation. And Joanne and I would like to share with you guys some information just regarding special education supports and services outside of the school and what those processes could look like. So, we're just going to start off and review the information that we're going to cover today are some child find, age of services, transition and what that looks like, vocational rehabilitation, pre-ETs, and transfer of rights. And so hopefully by the end of today, you'll have more knowledge and understanding about these areas. As a reminder, from a child find perspective, once a child reaches 3 years of age, they are considered school age, and special education services could begin as early as 3 years of age and could go all the way up until 22 years of age. And so I just remind families that if they do have a young child at home, whether they were in first steps or not in first steps, if you have concerns about their skills and abilities and their development, or if you have some, diagnoses and you're aware of some things, I want you to be aware that you could reach out to the school and have an evaluation starting at 3 years of age. This includes families who do choose to homeschool. So even if a child is homeschooled, you could still reach out to the school, have a special education evaluation, and potentially develop what's called a service plan instead of an IEP. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to call the CEP Shared Service Office. Our number is there. It will be also listed throughout the presentation, or you could call your local school office and they can connect you with that. So now I'm going to allow Joanne to share a little bit just about a variety of services that we want families to be aware of. Joanne, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Paige. So yes, like Paige said, I'm with Vocational Rehabilitation which is an agency in the state of Indiana, and I want to share just some information about different types of services that are available for individuals with disabilities. The Vocational Rehabilitation Services is under the umbrella of the Division of Disability, Aging, and Rehabilitative Services. And there are also several agencies within that umbrella. So I want to mention first, first I'm just going to kind of summarize some of the different options there are. And the reason I talk about all of these options is that we want to help you get connected with the services that are most appropriate for you, because sometimes when people get plugged into something that they might not need yet or is something they might not need ever, it doesn't streamline the process for you. So some of the services that you're going to want to consider at different points of time are Medicaid waiver services, pre-employment transition services, which is a service of vocational rehabilitation, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Disability services through colleges, if your student is planning to do some post-secondary work. Work One has a lot of services available. WIPA is a program that helps individuals understand how working will affect their disability. Employers have services as well. They provide accommodations depending on the need, and as well as technology. There are some assistive technology agencies and actually a program called InData where there's training available, there's loaner items available, sometimes free of cost. There are centers for independent living in different areas of the state, which have other services that can be of assistance. There may be transportation services in your area for individuals with disabilities, and there's also advocacy groups. So I encourage you to look into those resources that are in your area. So next I want to talk about, which is on the next slide, the career exploration and planning services. These are services that are available through the waiver, Medicaid waiver services. So that is something that is important to apply for. It's a good idea to apply when your student is young. So if you are already plugged in with that service, that's great, because when the time comes, you'll be able to get these services when needed. So they can help you with exploring different career options, and that's before you're actually ready, usually before you're ready to go into job search. So I wanted to present that first, because what we mostly do is you don't have to be 100% ready to get a job to come to vocational rehabilitation or especially pre-employment transition services. But once you come to Voc Rehab, it is expected that you're going to engage in services moving towards getting a job as the next step. So,
Joanne, can I pause you
yes,
right there and just ask, you
sure,
talked about the Medicaid waiver and you shared go ahead and start that process now. Um, the younger, the better, but yet never too late. So if we do have
right.
some younger children with disabilities, they could apply for that Medicaid waiver now, correct?
That's correct.
And
Yes.
also the other one, and I know I have a lot of families who fall into this kind of misunderstanding. Mom and dad, if you both have a job and you have insurance benefits through your employer, and you say, "Oh, our family has insurance," this is different. So, can you talk a little bit about the Medicaid waiver for individuals with disabilities and how that looks different than a family who says, "Oh, we don't need Medicaid, we have insurance"?
Sure. So Medicaid waiver is going to be offering services that are not normally covered by insurance. So individuals with disabilities may have greater needs than insurance coverage will provide. And that Medicaid waiver also waives the requirements for financial requirements that normally comes with regular Medicaid. And it is not the same. So you can have a it just will provide a different service. And I also wanted to mention along with that, that that to apply, there's an online application process, and that is through the Bureau of Disability Services, which is also under DDARS, DDARS that I mentioned earlier. So I'm not the highest expert in Medicaid waiver services, but they are a sister agency of ours, so we do work hand
Wonderful.
in hand.
And so on our special education website, we will have a link to that resource that you could contact someone who can help you with that and apply online through that process. So there will be a link on our special education website for families to access that if they need. Thank you.
Excellent. Sure, no problem. All right, so now I'm going to talk about pre-employment transition services. These are services that help your students with disabilities that are ages 14 through 22 and in school. So the students have to be in school in order to be engaging in these services. And we work with students to do job exploration activities, work-based learning, which may be like an internship or other job trial type activities, workplace readiness, which it could be covering social skills and other skills that are just needed for any job environment, self-advocacy, helping students understand how to advocate for their needs in the workplace and in their lives, and counseling on post-secondary education opportunities. So that is helping students to explore and find out if there are training programs beyond high school that would be appropriate for them, that would help them reach their vocational goals. So most of the time, these services are provided at the school. We have providers that work with vocational rehabilitation to provide those services on site. There are also many of our providers will do services during the summer. So they're able during the summer to do a lot more activities in the community. Also, sometimes they have those programs during winter break, spring break, fall break, all of those other extended breaks that students have during the school year. So this really just helps to prepare your students for what's next. And what it exactly looks like may depend on the provider that works in your school. Sometimes they are provided in small group settings, sometimes individual, but for all of the students, the goal is to help them come out of that program with an idea about what job would be a good goal for them and what they need in order to get there. So it's really a great program.
Thank you. And so, for our families, just to recognize within an IEP meeting, when we have our annual case conference, we begin talking about transition starting at the age of 14. And we do complete a transition assessment yearly with your child and review that information at the case conference. But an additional support or service to that transition is this what we call pre-ETS or pre-employment transition services. And so the teacher of record that works with your child does have an application that you would need to complete to sign up your child to receive those pre-ETS services, but a great opportunity to work on these different skills while in school through a provider.
Thank you. All right, so vocational rehabilitation is a service that assists individuals with disabilities in these areas that it's all focused on employment. So if a person doesn't have a goal of getting a job, then vocational rehabilitation wouldn't be the right service for them, but it could be down the road once they do decide they want to go that direction. So once again, like was mentioned for the Medicaid waiver, it's never too late to apply. It's a great idea to apply before exiting high school, but again, if a person isn't ready for that step, then they can always wait and apply later on. So the focus is preparing for employment, obtaining employment, retaining employment, and advancement in employment. So the preparing part, we might be working on figuring out what the best job goal is for the individual based on their interests, abilities, and what supports they might need for that role. And also helping them to understand how to create a resume, how to complete a job application and an interview. So then there's also support in that process of getting the job. So depending on the person's level, everybody would receive only the services that they need because one person is very different from another person. One person might be able to look for their job independently. Another person needs to have a lot of support in that process. So that's basically how VR operates on an individual basis and based on what the person needs in that process.
And
So
Joanne,
yes,
sorry.
no
I know
problem.
one of the things that, parents are worried about at times is, oh, well, my child won't receive their disability check if they have a job. But within that, they are allowed to make a certain amount of money, and vocational rehabilitation can assist and support in recognizing what that could look like for them to still
Yes.
reach employment, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is a benefits counseling service that would be provided for anyone who does receive disability benefits. And that will help the individual understand how much, or how their disability payments would be affected by their income depending on what job it is that they obtain. So you can get some basic counseling at the outset to kind of understand what it would look like. And then when you actually get a job, you can have very specific counseling that helps you know exactly how that works and also how you can reduce the effect on your income by submitting receipts for certain expenses that are deductions to allow you to keep more of your check.
Wonderful.
All right, so this shows you basically that we have 5 regions across Indiana, and that's how we have our VR program organized, can we say. So this map, if you were to go to our website, you would be able to see the office that pertains to your area. You don't actually have to figure out which office you would go to in order to refer yourself or your child, or for your teacher to refer you. Because if you submit an online referral, that will automatically get routed to the office that would be the correct one for where you live. All right, so just to summarize quickly, when we're looking at eligibility for vocational rehabilitation, we're talking about having a disability, whether physical or mental, that physical or mental disability is presents a barrier for employment, that a service from vocational rehabilitation is required to assist the individual in reaching their employment goal that they have. And finally, that they're able to benefit from services in order to reach a competitive integrated employment goal. So I have mentioned before that Voc Rehab is all about employment, but I failed to specify that the goal is definitely for community integrated employment. So we are looking at individuals obtaining employment in an environment that includes individuals with or without disabilities, not an environment that is individuals with all disabilities. There may be other programs available for those other environments, but vocational rehabilitation is specifically for community integrated employment. All right, so also just to mention, it doesn't have to be full-time, it can be part-time. It's going to be whatever is appropriate for the individual that is seeking employment. The process is basically you would do your referral, you get an complete your application with an intake counselor, your eligibility is determined. After that, you have a counselor that works on a plan with you, and then you get all your services plugged in to help you towards obtaining your job. I'm just going to mention a few of the services. The main one is vocational counseling and guidance. So you would have a counselor from Voc Rehab that would work with you on determining a good path for you and what services are needed to assist you, etc. Some of the other services include physical and mental restoration if that is needed, assistive technology, training. The biggest one, aside from counseling and guidance, is job-related services. So that would be what you often hear, a job coach or an employment specialist who assists with the job search, with learning the job, etc. Again, like I said before, according to the needs of the individual. Supported employment is for an individual who needs more support on the job in learning that job and continuing or being prepared for changes on the job. And that is a service that can go on for a longer term than your basic job-related services. And also consultation and technical assistance, just depending on the disability and what the needs are. Now I just want to mention a few of the other resources. So some of those would include Work One. There's a lot of different services that Work One has. So let's say someone is thinking about whether they need Voc Rehab or not, and thinking, well, possibly I wouldn't need vocational rehabilitation. You might want to go to Work One first and see what they have to offer, and you may be just on your way and not need to apply to Voc Rehab. There's also resource guides for each area. So that's something that you can find on our website that will help you know about the different options there are. Um, for assistance. There's some websites that are really helpful. For example, mynextmove.org. It helps you explore different career areas, and they tell you about each job role, what kinds of skills it requires, the education required. It also tells you what what income you might be able to expect from that job. So it's very helpful. And just as a reminder, I mentioned it before, considering post-secondary is really important as well. There's a range of different post-secondary options. And if a student is looking at college, looking at that college and finding out what their disability services could provide. And also the colleges do have job placement services. So it's always good to look at those services before coming to Voc Rehab. Not always before, because sometimes it's clear that you do need to come to Voc Rehab, but when you're not sure, you may have what you need, and it's a little bit simpler of a process. Voc Rehab can be a little bit more detailed and lengthy, so that's why I suggest approaching some of the other programs as well.
And Joanna, you make that point. It is a process and a bit lengthy, but as I share with parents, when a child is in pre-ETS and receiving those pre-ETS services through school, that pre-ETS service provider helps and supports the student and the family through that vocational rehabilitation transition. So that is one of the
Yes,
huge perks I have seen of students who are in pre-ETS. And having a pre-ETS service provider help them transition into that vocational rehabilitation as they exit school.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is quite true.
So, thanks so much, Joanne. Stay because I've got a few more questions for you and some
Okay.
information that we can add in. But an additional topic here that we have is when we talk about transfer of rights. And so, once a student turns 18, um, there is a natural legal transfer of decision making and transfer of rights from parents to that 18-year-old individual. And so, from the Department of Education, from the school lens, we really want to look at what that means for you and your family moving forward. And so, we have some resources from the Indiana Disability Rights that can provide information. I know many times we talk about, we're looking specifically at education and the IEP, but for you as a family, you have to recognize what that means from a lens of healthcare and also financial lens. And so those are three big areas when we talk about adulthood and transferring of rights. And we talk about guardianship often, but really we want to recognize that there is a continuum of that process. And so you don't have to obtain full guardianship of your student, but maybe there's a limited guardianship. Maybe there's some supported decision making, and just being aware of that process. That once your student turns 18, if you've not done anything prior to that, the rights do transfer to that 18-year-old student. And so for families, we want you to be aware of that transfer of rights. We want you to recognize that there is a continuum of that supported decision making, and choosing that least restrictive option that provides students the supports that they need. But also, as a family, you guys can make good decisions. I think one of the biggest things, and we have seen this a lot, way too often, students graduate high school. They have received supports through an IEP all through high school. They've attended school for 13 years of their life, And then after that, they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They end up sitting on the couch at home for 2 or 3 years. And finally, parents reach out to the school and say, help, we need something. And we're like, well, you're done. You're out of school. Here's Voc Rehab. And what we really want is we recognize that when students have routine in their life, when they have consistency, when they have a schedule, when they have the expectations that they have within a school environment, it is much easier to transition from school to continued education, job training, or employment as a smooth transition with the supports of vocational rehabilitation versus when they've been at home for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years with nothing, and then they're trying to find something. So we really want to
Mhm.
help and support families recognize that this transition process can begin through pre-ETs as young as 14 years of age and continue right on as a student exits high school. Joanne, do you have any additional information that you would like to share with our families as we look at those supports and services that are available to them?
I just encourage everyone to be asking questions and making contact. If there's any doubt at all about whether a service is appropriate or if it's the right time, contact that office. You know, if it's vocational rehabilitation, contact the office, have a conversation. Um, they are likely to say, well, are you wanting to apply? Feel free to say, well, I want to talk to somebody to find out if it is the right time to apply. And they should be able to get you connected with someone to discuss that with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Um, I do appreciate families who are taking time to learn and to grow from a CEP shared service perspective. We do want to stay connected and build those relationships so that we can support you and your students as they move forward and continue their education. We will have our next CEP virtual parent meeting on April 24th. At that point, we are going to talk about special education eligibilities and evaluations, identifications versus medical diagnoses, and we will have our school psychologist joining us for that presentation. So we do look forward to sharing with you. As I shared, we will have this video and resources on our website, so please come back to that and get more information there. Thanks again for joining us today.